Here are 3 things I wish I'd known about villains before dealing with them. I've also hunted people through the jungle. I've had some rather strange experiences.
Hi there. I'm an ex-military physician and known troublemaker who now spends most of my year bringing meds to Guarani people in South America, where I live like an RPG character, completing quests that have ranged from hiding an abused kid in my house from a machete-wielding maniac to quietly documenting jungle medicinal plants. I've swum with sharks, jumped into frigid mountain waterfalls, pissed off high-ranking officials, and trained parrots to save my life. I'm on my flawed journey to becoming, and this channel is for people who would actually like to become real-life superheroes.
And number 1, I wish I had known that bad guys don't usually look like bad guys. One of the major problems we had with this one child harm case that we took care of was that people were shocked. They couldn't believe, even if there was evidence, that this guy was hurting this kid. Why? Because he's a hard worker. So villains, that doesn't matter. Also, your vibe check is usually wrong. Some people think they have a great vibe check, just like they have a great gaydar or whatever. Even though a lot of investigators will actually swear by them, they're investigators who say, oh, I could tell she was lying because she had a very still face when she was reporting the crime, or so on and so forth. There are other people who say that if somebody's not in hysterics, they haven't actually been assaulted, for example. Well, there are a number of studies on the neurobiology of trauma that will show otherwise, that show that this is a very individual process. If you would like to really understand the neurobiology of trauma, I'm going to go ahead and link to a large class that is currently given to law enforcement officers that goes in depth with all the different studies, because you can't just trust what somebody says. You have to trust what's the actual neurochemical response. And unfortunately, the reality is that our behaviors, facial expressions, how we lie, are very culturally dictated. So somebody who avoids eye contact in the United States, maybe that's the sign in a very white-dominated culture of lying. But Koreans, if you are staring somebody in the eyes like this, you're a psychopath and gonna kill someone. That's not normal. That's not how people talk. That's not how people look at people. So these things are very culturally dominated. So what if you have a young Korean American, first generation, reporting a crime to an older Southern gentleman, right? How is he going to interpret her body language? The other issue is that there's 3 kinds of responses when it comes to an adrenaline surge, right? You can have fight, you can have flight, and you can also have freeze. And a lot of people, because they don't understand their own responses, will be real confused when they're reporting a crime, because it'll be like, why didn't you fight back? And it's like, why didn't I fight back? What was going on? Well, because there are cases where your body will actually lock up on you and create a paralysis. Kind of not exactly like sleep paralysis, but it's a similar problem in that there's a bunch of neurotransmitters that are being sent through your body in order to protect you. Right? One major, it's almost like you're being forced to play dead. And it especially happens when we have a really, really high adrenaline surge. You can train your adrenaline responses, but they are innate. It's very hard to train. That's like trying to train your heart rate. I can teach you how to train your heart rate because I actually can manipulate my heart rate, but it took me maybe 10 years to learn how to do that. So it takes, those are not easy things, and expecting somebody to suddenly just have a different neurotransmitter response is highly illogical and kind of unfair too. So yeah, that's the second thing. You can't trust vibe checks. There's no studies that prove vibe checks. There's actually not even a lot of the manuals that are like, if so-and-so does this and this, they're more likely to lie. They don't have good studies with them. They can't prove them. And really, if you're going to be putting someone in jail or not believing a testimony, the onus is on you, right? To provide evidence that the means that you're using are a trustworthy means. Okay? So that's my thing number 2. I wish I'd known about bad guys at the beginning, is that vibe checks. And in fact, it goes further because this goes into workplace issues too. I had so culturally, and this isn't the universal case, but in the United States, Black Americans use their hands more, move their hands more, a little more like Italian Americans. It's not a race thing so much as a cultural or ethnicity thing. Well, I had a patient in the military who got in trouble. She had a broken foot, and she, you know what you're supposed to do when a high-ranking officer comes by, you stand up and you salute. Well, she had a broken foot, so it took her a second to stand up. She'd been in a car accident. I was taking care of her for a chronic pain issue that was related to this, and later I took care of her for other issues related to injustice. But she took a while to stand up, and then she got in trouble for this. She got in trouble for taking a while to stand up because the guy couldn't see her foot because it was under the desk. So he reported her to her commander. And when she was explaining to the commander, she spoke to him moving her hands because she was upset that this guy had reported her for something that she didn't do wrong, and understandably upset, right? She's injured and trying to stand up. She's injured and still deployed, by the way, even though she was injured. She wanted to deploy, and she didn't try to back out of it, right? And, you know, maybe we shouldn't have let her deploy because they treated her so terribly over there that it probably would have been a mercy for her not to. But I wasn't in charge of making that call. Someone else made that call and let her over there where we treated her terribly. Everyone treated her really badly. So, you know, that happened. And then, and because she moved her hands like this, when I was trying to explain her situation or defend her a little bit to her commander, he was like, no, but the way that she moved her hands let me know that she's not a good soldier and doesn't have good attitude. It's kind of like, so she's not allowed to be upset for being falsely accused of something or being accused of something that she was slow getting up. She's in a cast, right? It's not like there are fakers. I've dealt with fakers, and I can teach you later some, well, I don't know if I want to teach you physical exam tricks about faking. I have to think about that one because maybe we don't want everybody knowing those things, but maybe I'll teach that in a private class. If you want that, let me know, and we'll teach privately how to fake or not fake a physical exam, how to catch someone who's faking a physical exam. I'm not teaching you how to fake things, but you know, so she's got a real problem. I'm a physician, I know she has a real problem, but any dummy could tell she has a real problem. So she got in trouble for that, and then the trouble increased because she moved her hands when she was talking. He didn't put her at a position of attention, so why can she not move her hands, right? He was a white guy, and white people of certain ethnicities, because white is also kind of a made-up term. It didn't really exist, by the way, until people needed it to try to justify racism. It's not a real term. Just historically, it's not. And we know it's not because Irish people weren't white at one point. Why? Because we wanted to be racist against them. So, yeah. So white isn't a real term. But I don't know, unfortunately, this guy's actual ethnicity because the history in the United States has unfortunately literally whitewashed and erased a lot of the diversity that there was in this various ethnicities of the people who eventually became white. So it's interesting because by erasing the ethnicities of the other people they wanted to oppress and grouping them all into one category of colored people or whatever, they also ended up erasing their own identities. But that's a history thing for you from the way past. For the now, unfortunately, this guy's culture is a much more stoic culture. I can't entirely blame him either because he's not looking at her and saying, oh, she's black, therefore she's a bad soldier. He's looking at her and saying, why is she moving her hands like that and being loud and rebellious? Because his culture is, if you're in the right, you're not worried. If you're in the right, you're calm and stoic. I know I'm right, and therefore I don't need to freak out, especially if I'm a woman. That's his culture. So he doesn't know that, hey, that's not the universal reality. The universal reality is different. So some people, if they're in the right, they're going to get upset, which is again why a lot of interrogation techniques are kind of bullshit, and they're necessarily going to catch only people who are a different culture from the interviewer, or a different culture from the culture the interviewer has been educated in. So that's the second thing that I learned about villains. Vibe checks. You can't trust vibe checks. You can, and your feelings should give you information. It's good to have feelings and use that for information. If you have a bad feeling about someone, yeah, that can save your life, but look for evidence first. Certainly don't do anything to someone without serious evidence. And evidence, when I'm using the word evidence, I'm not saying even something just as simple as testimony. I'm saying like edut from the Torah. I'm saying like you have to know like something that definitively proves that something was there. They would put up like rocks and things to write on to symbolize like this happened in this spot, and we were here, and you were here, I was here, we were both witnesses. So the edut or witnesses is the rock and the two people. It's the physical evidence, and it's the people who were actually there. They can't have been over there and kind of seen. They have to have been part of it, which is why even though the Torah prescribed the death penalty for murder, it was very rarely actually applied, because it's very difficult to match such strict standards for evidence. We have to have two or more actual evidences. So you have to have two people who actually were there and watched the murder. Not like in the United States where it's like, oh, I think that guy went in that building and he came out bloody and there was a dead body there. Let's put him on the death penalty, which is a real thing that's happened. That's a real case that I'm citing there, right? That's not a witness. We call that a witness in the United States. But in the Torah, that's not a witness. The witness is there in the room, part of it. So, my recommendation, given some of the things that I've seen, would be don't do anything to anyone unless you have two or more edut, right? Real witnesses, which is difficult to obtain. So thing number 3, I promised a third thing. About villains, don't give away your plans to them. I think this is the number one thing that those of us who can sometimes be Karens do. Quite frankly, the world needs Karens. People don't like Karens, but the world needs somebody who stands up and says, I think that something bad is happening to that child. I think that this restaurant is discriminating against such and such kind of person. I think this and this thing is happening. The problem is that a lot of Karens want to fight over every little tiny thing. We really need to direct their joint power towards something important, towards something that matters. But a lot of times it's only if they're uncomfortable. It's for them, and it's part of this me self-care culture. I am a big proponent of self-work. Real self-care involves work. It involves sitting down and doing CBT or DBT or some other manualized therapy where you actually have to put in work, something where you have to work. That's self-care. Self-care isn't sitting in the bath eating chocolate, drinking wine, and then running away from and cheating on your husband Eat, Pray, Love style. We don't do Eat, Pray, Love here. That's not self-care. And unfortunately, that attitude, that same entitled attitude, is the attitude that you see behind a lot of Karens. But the reality is that same energy, if we can direct that energy, if there's a problem here, control it, modulate it in the right direction, wow, those are the people that'll change the world. And you see sometimes those are the people changing the world. I have seen people that I guess would probably be called Karens by some standards go against school systems and make big changes for handicapped kids, or make big changes in their neighborhood. What is a Karen? A Karen is it's also terrible that we use this name. I feel so bad for real people who have this name. But point being, one major problem with Karens is strategy. If you're going against somebody who's really, really evil, you don't threaten them, you just do. I learned this the hard way because I used to be, and sometimes still am, this angry person who would send walls of text. You know that person. That's not a fun person to make angry. And I knew that, which is why I was not incentivized to stop, because it was to my benefit. It was in some way, it was hurting the other person, because I was hurt, right? It was revenge texting. So this is not a good thing to do in a military context where you've identified somebody as a danger to your patients. And I was doing it because I kept believing that I could get this person to change. I had somebody who was making calls about some of my patients that was worrying them. I had people who were making calls about my patients or who were straight up discriminating against my patients or doing other things that were harmful or even dangerous to my patients. And most of the time it would be really subtle, like administrative things, but sometimes it would be serious. You can really hurt somebody with the stroke of a pen by deciding where they are, where they're allowed to be, what happens to them if you have power over them, administrative power over them. And I would send out every time something went wrong, I would send out like walls of text at the people who did something wrong to try to tell them to not do that, right? So there were a lot of walls of text that I had sent out floating around the world. And there were a lot of people I offended, powerful people that I offended. Somebody even got pissed at me because they found out that I didn't want my deployment award because I, as an officer, was angry and ashamed at how some of our lower enlisted weren't getting the awards that they merited, and officers were automatically getting deployment awards just for having gone. Meanwhile, some of our lower enlisted actually lost money on the deployment because of how the Army structured rotations and wasn't giving them certain pay. So I was angry about this, and I said, well, I'm ashamed to be getting an award while my soldiers are suffering and not getting awards for what they deserve, what they've done. At one point, I even tried to go all the way up to, and I wasn't very popular. So at one point, I even tried to go all the way up to Congress to get an award for one of my folks. And then someone else put in an award for that person, and she got it right away because they didn't like me. And they wanted the medic to not be able to say that I had gotten it for them, which is so shitty and petty and still hurts me to this day. But so I did stuff like that. It's not big stuff. That wasn't a big thing. There were much more serious things where I was accusing people of not appropriately treating our sexual assault patients. That got me in big trouble because they weren't. And they didn't want that to be, they didn't like me yelling at them about that, right? But the thing that I did was I would try to reason with these people. And because there were a lot of walls of text about me, when the shoe finally came down and they got the opportunity, they just needed one person to falsely accuse me of pushing someone, which is why I understand both sides of the, there are people who are very afraid that people are falsely accusing people of things, and they're like, there's probably more false accusations of assault than there are real assault, blah, blah, or whatever. Right, so there's those people. You're wrong. Numerically, you're wrong, but that's okay. Because I also understand what it feels like to be falsely accused of something and have everyone in the world turn away from you and leave you behind and not believe in you anymore, and your entire career and everything to be wrecked. Everything just be wrecked. And when this happened, they had a bunch of extra little things that they could gather to say that because they were just trying to do anything they could. They actually could never get me on any actual thing. They just decided, because they couldn't prove, because I didn't touch people. So they couldn't prove that I had done anything, but they gather up to these messages for erratic and unprofessional behavior. I knew of a man who punched his superior officer in the face and didn't get put out of the military, right? They wanted to put me out of the military for yelling at a major. Which is, wow, okay, all right, that's how that works. They couldn't, but that was what they wanted to do. So I screwed myself in that situation basically by giving my plans away every single time. Every single time I would be like, well, you blah, 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 you're bad, and you did this, this, and this. Because I didn't understand I was dealing with actual bad people. I still thought that there was some hope that if I pushed enough, or I yelled enough, or I complained enough, that they would listen, right? But they won't listen. That's not how that works. You can't yell enough and make them listen if they're really bad people. So don't tell people your plans. And thankfully I learned this before going to Paraguay, where the stakes were actually much higher. The stakes were fairly high in the military, but you know, there's also some protective forces. In Paraguay, like, there are certain situations where if I'm not involved, someone else gets assaulted or might even not die, but well, maybe, there are cases where someone would die. So, you know, I can't be making those mistakes. And thankfully, I made all my rookie mistakes in the military. That doesn't mean that I don't make mistakes anymore. But now in Paraguay, hunting down guys in the jungle, or you know, finding different indigenous cases to send lawyers after, and getting testimony here and getting information there, asking phone company things here, like, basically, I'm technically, I guess you would call a private investigator, but I don't know, because I don't do that full time and I don't get paid. I'm just a Karen, and it's worked. It's because I was a sexual assault medical forensic examiner in the military. I kind of know what to look for, and I make sure to try to find evidence and testimony. And I do nothing unless I have a victim talking. I don't accuse people of things. I find out. I encourage the victim to stand up for themselves, and then from there I gather the things they need, or hide them in my house, or threaten the people who are threatening them. If you're going to threaten someone, though, you have to be real judicious. You can't just threaten people, and you have to be you can't be bluffing. People bluff way too much. It's much better, instead of threatening, to just do. The one time I've used a threat in Paraguay has been because I had a woman harassing another woman, accusing her of witchcraft, threatening to knock down her house, because it's a small indigenous community, so she can knock down her house, and she's a leader of the community. And this other woman had kind of helped me to get more information on this guy who has serially assaulted multiple women and girls. And again, we have multiple cases, but because no one will testify against him, because everyone is afraid, he's free. And I just have to find one person who's actually willing to testify, and I can pull the other things out of the woodwork. But I can't do that myself. I certainly can't go and accuse him, because there's always this tiny chance that he might be innocent. Because I am not an edut. I didn't see it happen. So I need somebody who saw it happen, and then I need to get the other evidence, right? And an investigator should be doing this, but an investigator can't do it unless somebody reports it. So it puts us in kind of a weird situation. So I have this lady, let's call her Teresa, who helped me with this situation and actually helped the assaulted girl medically, cleaning up her wound after she'd been cut in the face with glass. And this other woman, let's call her Sarah, was threatening her because the assailant is her brother, and she doesn't want him to go to prison. Bad things happen to child abusers in prison, right? So she's threatening this other lady. And so this is the one time, so I called her, and I have to be real careful. The other lady says, don't talk to her, so I don't talk to her. But I talked to her one time at the request of this other lady to say, like, hey, you know that threatening somebody is a crime that I can denounce you for, right? And that freaked her out because she doesn't want to go to jail. And then we had a conversation on the phone, and she said, I'll leave Teresa alone if you'll leave me alone. I said, that sounds like a really good plan. Let's do that. So she's not supposed to be involved in hiding her brother anymore. Because I told her, you have kids, Sarah. You will be an accomplice if you are threatening people to cover this up. So that is the one time that I have had a threat work. And in my younger days, I threatened people a lot. I know I look very young with the hair like this, and I don't know if there's a filter or something. I'm actually quite old, okay? I'm 10 years out of medical school. So, in general, it's actually better to keep it to yourself and just do it. Don't tell someone you're going to accuse them of a crime. Keep your mouth shut. Accuse them of a crime if they did it and you have evidence for it and you're a first-hand witness, right? Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. But that's the third thing. That's probably the biggest thing I wish I'd known about bad guys before actually dealing with any of them. Because once I started dealing with like really evil people, like the kind of people who will ruin other people's lives for their careers, like I saw in the military, but like cover up bad things for their careers, or threaten innocent women for their evil brothers, or actually, you know, assault children. Once I started dealing with really evil people, thankfully, you can't give your plans away. In fact, one time I was trying to kind of help a situation where the family of this little girl who hadn't saved her from being assaulted, but did still love her, I was trying to help them, because my plan had just been to get the abuser out. My plan had not been to get her out of her whole family. But the family did some things then in front of the child's lawyer, or Child Protective Services, that made it kind of impossible that they ever go back, which really sucks, because I know they love this child, but they didn't love her enough to protect her from this violent machete wielding maniac. And I understand that. I think most people didn't love her enough. Most people are afraid, or tired. I sometimes think, she had a rough situation. She's in a safe place now, but I still sometimes wonder if there's things that I could have done differently. And one of the things one of the things I did right, but that was frustrating, was when the family was wondering, because I gave the family the opportunity to come with me. Here's what happened. It was a rainy night, 11 p.m. There's water coming, there's water tip-tapping on the thatch roof. I'm sitting in an indigenous community. Tobacco smoke from a peace pipe, because they have that in, I don't know if we'd call it a peace pipe, but Guarani people, the Guarani, do use tobacco still for that, like kind of social pipe sharing, and also religious purposes. And I'm waiting for this little 4-year-old to get home from work on the street corner where she has been selling candy to try to, instead of going to school, right? Which is obviously dangerous. And I'm waiting because I now have a video recording of her grandmother admitting that that she was being tortured. And I have now, at this point, over a year, I've gathered a bunch of other minor evidences, like testimony from neighbors who didn't want to tell me, and suspicious situations with the brother trying to fight the assailant, who's actually trying to fight the assailant off and lost. Random different kinds of things that happen. And little details where I saw things that were not normal in the child's behavior. But I couldn't do anything with any of that. I was waiting for a first, I knew something, I knew what was happening to her, and I couldn't prove it. But I had my video recording, and then I just needed her. I needed her to come and testify. So I told the grandmother, let's go to the police. You're saying this is happening to this child, so let's go to the police. They can investigate. She said, okay. We were going to go together, and she didn't want to go because it was raining. And then the guy came home before the little girl did. So I left and I waited by the side of the road to intercept the little girl, because the guy was wondering. The guy asked the lady, where you want to go? Why do you want to go somewhere tonight? And then she didn't want to go anymore. He had hit her in the head with bricks before, is what the little girl told me later. So, hit the grandmother. So, she was afraid and not entirely all there. So, I was waiting. The next day, so I took the little girl to the police, and the next day I tried to get the grandmother to come with me, and she wouldn't. She wouldn't come. So I took her recording to the police, and the police began the investigation from there, and a 9-month-long ordeal began for me and the little girl. We had anticipated she was just going to spend the night, and then she would go back to her grandmother. But we had to wait a few weeks for the guy to get caught, and we had to help the guy get caught because we had to help the police investigate. The police were like, oh, we don't know where he is. I'm like, I can show you where he is, and went and showed them where he was, right? Which is incredibly dangerous. But things like that we had to do. So during the course of this investigation, the family is wondering, when are they going to get the girl back? The guy's in jail now. But now I have a problem because I legally have been given guardianship of this child on the night of showing up, because the government is supposed to put you emergently with someone while the investigation is happening. And the grandmother wasn't there. So I signed the paper. I was like, yeah, I mean, it's just going to be for a couple days, right? Okay, cool. It was not for a couple days. It ended up being a very long situation. And the little girl and I both bonded very heavily, and it was very painful how we ended up having to split. We're not split. I see her once a month and make sure to bring her the things she needs, and kind of, I'm like her fairy godmother, make sure her new mom is okay and everything is okay. But it was very painful change from living together and doing everything together, and she was like my child, to not. But all that aside, right? The thing that happened with the family, they were messaging me. I actually began to realize that, okay, first off, the teenage boy who's messaging me isn't on the little girl's side and is claiming that things didn't happen, that the little girl says happened, that the grandmother I have on recording says happened. She has certain evidence. It happened, okay? The little girl had been unable to tell us what happened and didn't happen until after she kind of got old enough. And the important thing was that she was able to say no. She was able to say, for example, no, he didn't do such and such to me, which is very difficult at 4 or 5 years old, right? And so they had multiple different psychologists evaluate her to figure out what kind of the situation was, and we had this other testimony. So we have the 2 people who were there, right? And then later, even the boys admitted, we saw this happen, right? And I had actually 2 other people who had admitted to seeing it. And again, they didn't do anything about it. So, that was difficult. So this teenager keeps texting me. I begin to realize he's not on our side. I still want good for him. I know he's in a difficult situation. But what I ended up knowing was I'm not going to be able to not tell him things. So I ended up just blocking his number, knowing that if I don't do this, I'm going to end up giving away my plan. So instead I said, you need to correspond with the little girl's lawyer. That's the person who has the answers and who is in charge of what happens in this situation, because I actually don't have control. So that, we learned. We grow and we learn not to tell people things. And in general, that's how it should be. When we're dealing right now with the cases, that we have 3 cases going on right now, it is just generally better not to tell them what your plan is. There are judicious moments where threats can be useful. In general, do not threaten people. First off, in many cases, it's illegal. If you threaten to sue someone because they said something, you can sometimes get in trouble. It depends on where you are in the world. But be very, very careful with threats. Don't make threats unless they're promises. And, so those are the 3 things that I wish I had known about bad guys before interacting with them.
Check out my little charity project at becomingheroed.byjenfinelli.com to start your origin story today as we turn your pain into the power that can change the world.